The arrogant challenge. The Crythian Empire had ruled the Andromeda sector for 3,000 years. Their warships were legends whispered across 100 star systems. Their technology had crushed civilizations that dared to resist. Admiral Vrex stood on the command deck of the Imperial dreadnought Eternal Dominance and felt the weight of that history behind him. He was about to add another chapter to the Crythian legacy. The blue planet below was called Epsilon Prime. It was a human colony world. The scanners showed 3 million inhabitants spread across 4 continents. The humans had been here for only 20 years. They had built cities and farms and factories. They had transformed this empty world into something productive. Admiral Vrex had to admit they were efficient colonizers. It would make them useful slaves once the conquest was complete. His second officer approached with a data tablet. The readings were complete. Admiral, the planet has minimal defenses. 6 orbital stations armed with kinetic weapons. A small fleet of 30 warships. Their largest vessel masses only 800,000 tons. Our dreadnought alone masses 12 million tons. The officer's voice carried amusement. They cannot possibly resist us. Vrex nodded slowly. He had read the intelligence reports on humanity. They were a young species. They had only achieved faster than light travel 80 years ago. They had spread to 40 star systems in that time, which was impressive for primitives. But they had never faced a true military power. They had never met the Crythian Empire. Prepare the planetary broadcast. Vrex commanded. Standard terms. Immediate surrender or face annihilation. We will give them 1 hour to respond. The communication officer activated the systems. The message would reach every screen and every speaker on the planet below. Vrex had delivered this speech on 14 worlds before. The words were always the same. The results were always the same. People of Epsilon Prime. I am Admiral Vrex of the Crythian Imperial Fleet. Your colony exists in violation of Crythian territorial claims. You will immediately cease all operations. You will surrender your weapons and your ships. You will submit to Crythian authority. Resistance will result in the complete sterilization of your world. You have 1 standard hour to comply. Vrex ended the transmission and settled into his command chair. On every other world, the waiting was the worst part. Leaders would panic. Civilians would riot. Someone would eventually contact the Crythian ship and beg for mercy. That was when the real negotiations began. How many slaves? How much resources? How complete the surrender needed to be? The communication officer made a surprised sound. Admiral, we are receiving a response already. That was fast. They must be more frightened than I thought. Put it through. The main screen flickered. A human appeared. She was young, perhaps 30 years old. She wore a simple gray uniform with no medals or decorations. Her hair was tied back. Her expression was neutral. Her eyes were calm. Admiral Vrex, she said. Her voice was steady. I am Governor Chin of Epsilon Prime. We have received your message. We find your demands unacceptable. Vrex sat forward slightly. Unacceptable? You do not understand your situation. We have 200 warships in orbit. We can destroy your entire colony in minutes. Governor Chin nodded. Yes, we are aware of your capabilities. We have been tracking your fleet since you entered the system 3 days ago. Your ships are impressive. Very large. Very intimidating. She paused. We are still declining your demands. The bridge went silent. Every Crythian officer stared at the screen. This had never happened before. No species refused the first ultimatum. It was foolish. It was suicidal. Vrex kept his voice calm. Governor, perhaps you do not realize the consequences of refusal. Your people will die. Every single human on this planet will be eliminated. Your colony will become dust. Chen's expression did not change. We understand the consequences, Admiral. We simply do not accept them. We are not leaving our world. We are not surrendering our ships. We are not becoming your slaves. If you want Epsilon Prime, you will have to take it. And we will make that very expensive for you. The transmission ended. The screen went dark. Vrex stared at the empty display for a long moment. His tactical officer spoke quietly. Admiral, what do we do? Vrex stood. His decision was easy. They had been given a chance. They had refused. Now they would learn what happened to species that defied the Crythian Empire. Prepare the fleet for planetary assault. Launch all fighter wings. Activate siege protocols. We will show these humans what real power looks like. The Crythian armada moved into attack formation. 200 warships arranged themselves in a sphere around Epsilon Prime. Fighter craft poured from launch bays like angry insects. Energy weapons began charging. Missile tubes loaded their payloads. Every system showed ready status. This was the moment when lesser species realized their mistake. This was when the surrender messages came flooding in. The communication channels stayed silent. No messages. No pleas. No offers of negotiation. The humans were either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. Vrex suspected the latter. Begin the attack. The Crithian fleet opened fire. Energy beams lanced down through the atmosphere. Missiles streaked toward the orbital stations. The display showed predicted impact times. 17 seconds until the first station was destroyed. 15 seconds. 12 seconds. The orbital stations moved. It was not a large movement. Just a shift of position. But it was perfectly timed. The Crithian missiles flew through empty space where targets had been moments before. The energy beams hit nothing but vacuum. Every single shot missed. Vrex felt his spine stiffen. Impossible. They cannot track our weapons. Their sensors are too primitive. Recalculate firing solutions. Fire again. The fleet fired a second volley. Again the human stations moved with impossible precision. Again every shot missed. Before Vrex could order a third attack, the human stations returned fire. 30 projectiles launched. They were simple kinetic weapons. Chunks of metal accelerated to high velocity. Primitive technology. Nothing that could threaten a Crithian warship. The first projectile struck a destroyer on the fleet's outer edge. It penetrated the energy shields as if they were not there. It tore through the hull plating. It continued through 3 decks before exploding inside the ship's reactor core. The destroyer vanished in a flash of white light. 5 more ships died in the next 4 seconds. The bridge erupted in chaos. Officers shouted damage reports. Tactical displays showed red icons where proud warships had existed moments before. Vrex gripped his command chair. How are they penetrating our shields? The science officer was frantically checking readouts. I do not know, Admiral. The projectiles should not be able to bypass our defensive systems. They are too slow. Too simple. Our shields should stop them easily. But they do not, Vrex said quietly. The science officer had no answer. The human fleet was moving now. 30 small warships accelerating toward the Crithian armada. They moved in patterns that made no tactical sense. They split apart and rejoined. They spun and twisted through space. They were not flying in military formation. They were flying like they were playing. Like this was entertainment. A frigate exploded as a human ship fired at point-blank range. The human vessel had appeared from nowhere. Vrex realized they were using some kind of stealth technology. His sensors could not track them properly. How did a primitive species develop stealth systems better than Crithian technology? Pull back to defensive formation. Activate close-range weapons. Focus fire on individual targets. The fleet tried to reorganize. But the human ships were everywhere. They appeared behind Crithian vessels and fired before disappearing again. They targeted engines and weapon systems with surgical precision. They were not trying to destroy the Crithian ships. They were disabling them. Crippling them. Leaving them floating helpless in space. Vrex watched his mighty armada fall apart. In 20 minutes of combat, he had lost 40 ships destroyed and 70 disabled. The humans had lost 3 vessels. 3. Against 200 Crithian warships. Retreat. Vrex's voice was hollow. Pull all ships back to the outer system. We need to regroup and analyze their tactics. The surviving Crithian vessels limped away from Epsilon Prime. The human ships did not pursue. They simply returned to their orbital stations and resumed their positions as if nothing had happened. As if they had not just handed the legendary Crithian Imperial fleet its first defeat in 300 years. Vrex stared at the planet on his screen. The blue world looked peaceful. Innocent. Harmless. But something was very wrong here. Humans were not supposed to fight like this. They were supposed to be weak. Frightened. Easy to conquer. Instead they had been calm. Precise. Almost casual in how they destroyed his ships. Get me high command, Vrex said quietly. I need to make a report. His officers did not look at him. They were all thinking the same thing. The Crithian Empire had made a terrible miscalculation about humanity, and Admiral Vrex had the unfortunate honor of being the first to discover exactly how terrible that miscalculation truly was. The uncomfortable truth. The Crithian High Command did not believe Admiral Vrex's initial report. They demanded he repeat every detail 3 times. They accused him of cowardice. They suggested his officers had malfunctioned equipment. They said everything except what Vrex knew to be true. The humans had defeated them easily. Too easily. It took the destruction of 2 more Crithian fleets before High Command accepted reality. Something was deeply wrong with their understanding of humanity. They sent strategist Kelmar to investigate. Kelmar was the finest military analyst in the Empire. He had studied the tactics of 400 species across 2 galaxies. He had written the combat doctrines that made the Crithian military unstoppable. If anyone could understand how humans fought, it was Kelmar. He arrived at Admiral Vrex's flagship 3 weeks after the disaster at Epsilon Prime. The dreadnought was still being repaired. Scorch marks covered the hull. Entire sections were sealed off from reactor damage. The crew moved quietly through the corridors. They had lost their confidence. Kelmar found Vrex in his private quarters staring at tactical displays. The Admiral looked older than he had 3 weeks ago. His scales had dulled. His movements were slow. "Show me everything," Kelmar said without greeting. Vrex activated the holographic projector. The battle played out in miniature above the table. Kelmar watched in silence as human ships danced through the Crithian formation. He watched Crithian vessels explode. He watched the retreat. When it finished, he asked Vrex to play it again. And again. And again. He watched the battle 7 times before speaking. "Their movements are not random," Kelmar said finally. "They appear chaotic, but there is structure underneath. See here." He pointed to a moment when 3 human ships split apart. They reform exactly 42 seconds later at precise coordinates. They knew where each other would be without communicating. "How is that possible?" Vrex asked. Kelmar shook his head. "I do not know yet. But this is not how military forces operate. This is something else. Something we have not encountered before." He looked at Vrex. "I need access to everything you know about humans. Every intelligence report. Every cultural analysis. Every piece of data we have collected." Vrex provided the files. Kelmar spent the next week reading constantly. He barely ate. He did not sleep. He absorbed information about human history and human society and human warfare. What he found disturbed him more than the battle footage. He called a meeting with Vrex and the senior officers. "What I am about to tell you will be difficult to accept," Kelmar began. "But you must understand this if we are to survive future encounters with humanity." The officers shifted uncomfortably. Kelmar activated a display showing Earth. "This is the human homeworld. It appears pleasant. Mostly water. Moderate temperatures. Abundant life. We classified it as a standard garden world. We were wrong." Kelmar changed the image to show Earth's wildlife. Predators with claws and fangs. Venomous creatures. Parasites. Diseases. This planet killed humans constantly throughout their evolution. They developed in an environment of continuous threat. But here is what makes them unique. He showed images of human history. Humans did not just survive their world. They dominated it. They killed every predator that threatened them. They eliminated diseases. They reshaped their entire planet to suit their needs. And then Kelmar paused. "They got bored." "Bored?" Vrex repeated. Kelmar nodded slowly. "Yes, Admiral. Bored. When humans ran out of external threats, they began fighting each other. Not for resources. Not for survival. For entertainment." He displayed human conflicts. Thousands of wars. Millions of battles. Billions of deaths. Look at the frequency. They have been in a state of organized warfare for their entire recorded history. They have never stopped fighting. Not once. Not ever. One officer spoke up. "Many species have wars. That does not explain their combat superiority." Kelmar smiled, but it was not a pleasant expression. "You misunderstand. These were not wars of necessity. Humans invented reasons to fight. They fought over invisible lines on maps. They fought over which deity to worship. They fought over economic theories. They fought over insults to their honor. Sometimes," Kelmar's voice dropped, "they fought simply to see who was better at fighting. They called them sports, games, recreation." The room went silent. Kelmar continued. "Do you understand what this means? Humans evolved fighting. Then they spent 10,000 years practicing fighting. They developed thousands of combat styles. Hundreds of weapon types. Dozens of tactical doctrines. All before they even reached space. By the time they developed faster than light travel, they had already accumulated more combat experience than most species gain in their entire existence. But our technology is superior," another officer protested. "Our weapons are more powerful. Our ships are larger." Kelmar shook his head. "Technology does not win wars. Strategy wins wars. And humans have been perfecting strategy since before they could write." He showed footage from the Epsilon Prime battle again. "Watch their ships. They do not fly in standard formations because standard formations are predictable. They move like they are playing a game because to them this is a game. They have been playing war games for thousands of years. They have professional athletes who practice tactical thinking. They have children's toys designed to teach combat strategy. Their entire culture is built around competition and conflict. Vrex felt cold. Are you saying we cannot defeat them? Kelmar was quiet for a long moment. I'm saying we attacked a species that views warfare as entertainment. We threatened them with annihilation and they were amused. Look at the communication from Governor Chin. He played the message again. Listen to her voice. She is not afraid. She is not angry. She is calm. Almost relaxed. Like she is discussing the weather. To her, our threat was not terrifying. It was interesting. A challenge to overcome. A problem to solve. Another game to play. One officer stood abruptly. This is insane. They are not immortal. They can be killed. We have killed them. We can kill more. Yes, Kelmar agreed. But at what cost? We sent 200 ships against one colony world. We lost 40 ships and accomplished nothing. Humanity has colonized 40 star systems. If every colony fights like Epsilon Prime, we would need to sacrifice our entire fleet just to take 1% of their territory. And while we did that, they would be building more ships. Learning our tactics. Adapting their strategies. That word hung in the air. Adapting. Kelmar pulled up more data. This is what truly frightens me. After our first attack, the humans at Epsilon Prime modified their tactics. When we sent the second fleet, they were ready for our adjusted strategy. When we sent the third fleet, they had already predicted our new approach. They learn faster than we can plan. They evolve their methods between battles. By the time we develop a counter to their tactics, they have already moved on to something new. So what do? Vrex asked. Kelmar looked tired. We do what no Krithian commander has ever done before. We negotiate. We establish diplomatic relations. We treat them as equals. Because the alternative is a war of attrition against a species that never stops fighting and never stops improving. A species that sees our threats as challenges. Our attacks as training exercises. Our best efforts as entertainment. The officers protested. The Krithian Empire did not negotiate with primitives. They did not treat inferior species as equals. They conquered. They ruled. That was the natural order. Kelmar let them argue. Then he showed them one final piece of data. After we retreated from Epsilon Prime, human communications were intercepted. Do you know what they said? They were disappointed. They had expected us to be more challenging. They wanted us to try harder. The room fell silent again. Kelmar pressed on. They posted recordings of the battle on their information networks. Millions of humans watched the footage. Do you know what they did? They critiqued our tactics. They pointed out our mistakes. They laughed at how predictable we were. They made jokes about how our ships moved too slowly. Their military academies are using our attack as a training example. They are teaching their officers what not to do by studying how badly we performed. We have become a lesson in their textbooks. A cautionary tale about overconfidence and poor planning. Admiral Vrex closed his eyes. His entire career had been built on Krithian superiority. His entire worldview was crumbling. Is there anything else? Kelmar hesitated. Then he nodded. Yes. One more thing. The humans at Epsilon Prime sent us a message after the third fleet retreated. He played the recording. Governor Chin appeared on screen. She looked directly at the camera. Admiral Vrex, we know you are still watching. We want you to understand something. You came here expecting us to be afraid. You thought your superior technology and larger ships would make us surrender. But you made a fundamental mistake. She leaned forward slightly. You assumed we had never faced superior opponents before. You assumed we had never overcome impossible odds. You assumed we would break under pressure like other species you have conquered. Chin smiled. It was not a cruel smile. It was almost friendly. But it sent chills through every Krithian who watched. Let me tell you about humanity, Admiral. We spent 200,000 years as prey animals on Earth. Everything on our planet tried to kill us. We had no claws. No fangs. No venom. No armor. We were slow and weak and fragile. So we learned to think. We learned to plan. We learned to work together. We learned to never give up. Because giving up meant extinction. She stood. We survived ice ages. We survived plagues. We survived predators and parasites and starvation. We climbed to the top of our food chain not because we were strong but because we refused to die. Every time something tried to destroy us, we found a way to destroy it first. That is what makes us human. Not our technology. Not our weapons. Our absolute refusal to accept defeat. The message continued. So yes, Admiral, your ships are bigger. Your weapons are more powerful. Your empire is older. But none of that matters. Because we have something you do not have. We have 10,000 generations of ancestors who survived impossible situations. We have a species-wide memory of overcoming every threat our universe could create. And we have turned that survival instinct into an art form. Chen's expression hardened. You came to Epsilon Prime to make us afraid. You failed. You came to make us surrender. You failed. You came to show us your power. And instead we showed you ours. She leaned back. We do not want war with the Crithian Empire. But if you insist on one, we will oblige. And when it is over, your empire will be a memory. Our empire will still be standing. Not because we are better than you, but because we have been preparing for this fight since we first stood upright on the plains of Africa 3 million years ago. The message ended. Kelmar turned off the display. That, gentlemen, is what we are facing. Not just a species with good tactics. Not just a military with advanced technology. We are facing a species that has been forged by 3 million years of continuous struggle. A species that treats existential threats as problems to solve. A species that responds to our invasion fleets with amusement and mild annoyance. He looked at each officer in turn. We cannot conquer them. We can only survive them. And that requires us to stop being conquerors and start being diplomats. Admiral Vrex stood slowly. He walked to the window and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, humanity was expanding. Building. Growing stronger. And they were doing it all while barely noticing the Crithian Empire's existence. We will recommend negotiation to High Command, he said finally. We will propose a non-aggression treaty. We will establish trade relations. We will treat them as equals. Not because we want to, but because the alternative is extinction. The meeting ended. Officers filed out quietly. Only Kelmar remained. He stood beside Vrex at the window. Do you think High Command will listen? Kelmar asked. Vrex shrugged. If they do not, they will learn the same lesson we did. Humans do not fear superior force. They do not surrender to impossible odds. They adapt. They overcome. And they never ever stop fighting. He turned to Kelmar. We built our empire by conquering weaker species. We mistook our victories for proof of superiority. But humanity has shown us the truth. We were never the apex predators we believed ourselves to be. We were simply fortunate enough to never meet real predators until now. Kelmar nodded slowly. So what happens next? Vrex smiled grimly. Now we do what the humans have done for millions of years. We adapt. We learn. We survive. Because the galaxy has changed. The Crithian Empire is no longer the most dangerous species in space. Humanity has claimed that title. And they did it without even trying. They did it simply by being themselves. That thought should terrify us. But perhaps it should also teach us something. Kelmar raised an eyebrow. What? Vrex looked back at the stars. That strength is not measured in ship tonnage or weapon yield. Strength is measured in the will to continue when all logic says you should quit. And by that measure, humanity may be the strongest species that has ever existed. He walked toward the door. Come. We have much work to do. If we cannot defeat them, we must learn from them. And perhaps in learning from humanity, the Crithian Empire can become something greater than conquerors. Perhaps we can become survivors. The door closed behind them. The stars continued to shine. And somewhere on Epsilon Prime, 3 million humans went about their day. Building their colony. Raising their children. Living their lives. Utterly unconcerned that they had just changed the balance of power in an entire galaxy. Because to humanity that was just another Tuesday.